Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to Celebrate with L.A. Williams. My name is L.A. Williams, and I am so honored to bring to you this very, very special episode. Today, we are celebrating the one and only Mr. Ron Cephas Jones. Mr. Ron, how you doing, brother?
Blessed, LA. Very blessed, man. Very blessed.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
Before I get into sort of a deeper introduction of you, I want to talk a few seconds about what Celebrate is and what it means to me, if that's all right with you.
absolutely.
Absolutely. So this series is a manifestation of a moment I had as a very young theater student. I was an undergraduate at Alabama State University, and I had walked over to the theater building to see a show. I'd never been inside a theater, never watched a play, any of it. And I saw a production of a play called Phaedra by Jean Racine, and it was directed by Professor Dr. Tommy Stewart. And it was one of those moments where I was like, oh my God, I am bitten by the bug. This is the rest of my life. I want to know everything about what's happening on the stage. But I also knew, Mr. Ron, that I wanted to find everybody involved in that production and say thank you to them. Thank you for changing my life. Thank you for inspiring me, uplifting me, giving me something to work towards. I mean, all of it. I needed to find everybody whose name was in that program and everybody I saw on the stage and behind the stage. I needed to find them and just hug them and say thank you. And that truly was the beginning of what is now Celebrate. Cut to some years later, I'm living in New York City, working in the theater, doing the grind, the hustle. And I truly have this divine inspiration to create a platform where I interview some of those people whose work has really inspired me and kind of listen to them talk about their journey, right? And what were some of the moments in their life that kind of like made them go, oh my God, or oh, whatever. And that is exactly how I started doing this. And here we are 10 years later, we're all pulling through this pandemic. We're like, reopening Broadway and trying to like come back in a healthier, stronger way. And shows started to happen, as you know, last fall. And I made a personal commitment to go out and watch shows and just show up for the people who were on the front lines, people I consider to be heroes. Ooh, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did, because the work, which is always inspiring, right? Always incredible, had a magic sauce on it this season, right? It was a historic season. We had 7 Black playwrights on Broadway and some incredible performers. And that's when I got to see you, Mr. Ron. I saw you in Lynn Nottage's CLYDE'S on Broadway. And brother, it was truly one of those experiences where I was changed by an evening in the theater, by all of the performances on that stage. And the thing that I remember most about your portrayal of Montrellis in that play was that I actually felt like I was in some ways seeing my highest self on that stage, right? I saw someone who was embodying you, the actor, embodying this character that represented a lot for me, right? The pain, the struggle, but also the perseverance, the resilience, the light, and that really changed me and moved me. And not to mention the other incredible castmates of yours who gave an outstanding performance. And Mr. Ron, listen, you are a legendary actor. Everybody knows that. You're one of those people that we're just so grateful to have in our community. You always inspire us. It's just amazing. So I feel honored to be able to say thank you, first of all, for that performance. Thank you. It was so grounded and so real and so channeled. I thought Mr. Ron is speaking and teaching. It was so stunning. And I just wanted to say thank you. So that's why I invited you to be here today and to listen to you talk about your journey and hold space for you and celebrate you. And I'm going to say thank you and love on you all this entire conversation. So get ready for it.
Thanks so much, LA. That means the world to me. Thank you very much. You unpacked a lot. Your inspiration is indicative of my inspiration. That's how I was initially inspired by the art and the craft of acting. And the people that inspired me, that's all there was. There was this theater that was happening for me in New York with the Negro Ensemble Company and all the things that Robert Hooks was doing with his repertory company in DC. The National Black Theater, Frank Severa's workshop, the things that Joseph Papp was doing at the Public. And that was the game. It was about real raw theater and what acting is and, reading learning techniques, Meisner, and and deciding whether you want to study with Stanislavski method or the Meisner method, or combine the two, exploring the Afrocentricity of acting, all the culture that's involved, and the different writers from Ed Bullins to Charles Gordon to Joseph Walker to all the way up into Lynn Nottage, and Dominique Morisseau and Katori Hall and even Birgis and so there's a line, especially even in regional with Penumbra and the things that Lou Bellaby has been doing over the years.
Absolutely.
Karamu House in Cleveland.
Yes.
And all that came out of there, and all the theater that they were doing in LA. So, and the August Wilson cycles were coming around. So that's where I came from. I was inspired by, actors like, Esther Roll and Diana Sand, Lou Gossett Jr. and Moses Gunn and Ivan Dixon. And there's a slew of African-American artists that we don't normally study in college and high school, so you had to be out on the streets and, go to the libraries and to the drama bookstores and find these plays and do the research and read. And I got addicted to that. I love the idea of study. I love studying history. I'm a big jazz aficionado. And so our arts tell our history as well. And we forget that because we live in a capitalist society. So everything else is driven by money, you know what I mean? And desire to make money. And it directly clashes with the artistic integrity of being able to do something and it's not valued in the way that other things are valued, say television or film, for instance. And even then, there's a whole independent thing that goes along with film as well. So your inspiration kicked up a lot of feelings for me because that's how initially I got started. Seeing a play and being inspired. There was a woman, her name was Andrea Edwards. I went to a small 4-year college in New Jersey called Ramapo State College, and they had a jazz professor there named Arnold Jones, and I went to study with him to be a jazz musician. And I saw a play in the college. It was the first Black woman I ever saw play Lady Macbeth. And we became very good friends. And the following year, she asked me if I would be a dancer in one of the plays they were doing because they were short on dancers. And then a year later, she offered me a role in a musical play. And I got hooked into theater, and so I changed my major in my end of my sophomore year from music to theater, and got a BA and bachelor in fine arts. So and then proceeded to hang out in New York most of the time. I'm talking about the mid 70s now, kind of giving my age away, but I graduated college in 78 and went to pursue an acting career and pounded the streets. And then the only game in town was backstage and showbiz, you'd go to different plays and talk to different directors, and I'm an actor and I'm trying to, that kind of thing. It was kind of the only game in town, but it was beautiful, man. The hustle it was really about embracing the hustle, and feeling like, oh man, I'm involved. I'm in it, although I'm not booking anything yet, but I'm here.
I'm in it. I'm in it. Yeah.
I'm in it. I'm meeting people. I'm going to plays. I'm scraping my little dollars together. I'm commuting back and forth from Jersey, and getting on the bus, and then once I got a car, it was like New York. It was like the connection between Jersey and New York. The bridge tunnel type cats. And so. Getting back to your first point, that's initially how I got inspired to be an actor. And I've been on that journey ever since, in and out of it as well. I left acting, drove a bus for 4 years in Los Angeles and came back. And I've been a waiter, a school teacher, a chemical factory worker, whatever it took to pay the bills, keep a couple dollars in my pocket so I could hang out at night and go see some jazz at the Village Vanguard, or that was the lifestyle. It was like working during the day and hanging out at night, making connections and taking lunch breaks, going to auditions, and and being late coming back, and being late for work because I had an audition, and and telling the boss, I'm sorry, and they would. Sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. It was just embracing the hustle, just embracing it, man, and feeling like I was always in it, one way or another. I knew eventually something's going to hit. Something's going to hit. Something's going to hit. It's bound to, man. It's the numbers. It's numbers, man.
It's numbers.
It's just the way numbers work, man. You keep pounding. Eventually, your numbers.
Eventually, your number gonna hit.
It's gonna hit, man. It's like keeping your mind and your heart. And don't get me wrong, I've been discouraged a lot of times, but I never got to the point where I felt like I wanted to quit. I always felt like, well, this is hard, and I don't really want to do it, but never like, okay, I'm just through with it. I knew eventually I'd get back to it, or I'd, take a detour and come back eventually. So that's how I initially got involved, man, which leads me all the way up to where I'm coming back to the theater after doing some successful TV and film. It's always been about the theater, and again, when you have the opportunity to work with writers like Lynn Nottage, that's everything, because that's ultimately what it's about. In order to do great work, you have to do great writers.
That's right. That's right.
You have to have great work in front of you to do great work. If you have mediocre work or less than mediocre work, that's the only kind of work you can put in.
You can put in. Yeah, exactly.
It's just not there. It's like you can't turn a rock into a diamond. You know what I mean? So
come on now.
But Lynn Nottage, I workshopped Lynn Nottage's plays over the years. I've been involved with her almost 20 years or more, I auditioned for some of her plays, and doing other things where I couldn't do some of her plays. But we both knew there was an energy, it's like eventually did the right role to come along, and eventually it did, so many, many years later, she was like, this is the role, Ron, there's no auditioning. If you're available, you got to play this role because you were the role I had in mind. So to be able to come back to Broadway in this difficult time during this whole COVID thing, and we got hit with that whole variant that just swept through Broadway,
Yes, it did.
It was really difficult, man. But we were lucky. We never got shut down. We had great understudies to fill in, and so it was wonderful working with Cara and Reza and Edmund. It's a beautiful play, man. I think they're getting ready to do another thing with it on the national level. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to do it, but that play still needs to be seen by a lot of people. It's a very important piece of literature.
I agree with you. It's a very important piece of literature. Thank you, Mr. Ron, for that beautiful sort of just walk through, touching on a lot of different moments. Everything you said. So what I like to do with these Celebrate conversations is start off by celebrating the day you were born. And that idea is meant to have you take us back as far as you want us to go, to wherever you want us to go, and kind of talk to us either about your birth story, your earliest memory, young life growing up, anything. But I just want to kind of go deeper into some of what you touched on just now, and see how we kind of move towards where we are now.
1957. I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey in 1957. I tell this story now. I was adopted. I was born there, and then I was, for whatever reason, given up and went to, from what I recall, my adopted mother, told me the story. I was at an adoption agency, and my mother, Annie Marie Jones, and my dad, Johnny C. Jones, adopted me maybe at the age of 12 months, anywhere between 12 to 14 months. And they've been my parents ever since. My mom passed in 2007, and my father passed in 1985. So I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey. Went to elementary school there, John F. Kennedy High School. And then on to, like I said, Ramapo College in upstate New Jersey. So I'm an original Jersey boy, hanging out in the streets of Paterson and Newark, New Jersey, and Jersey City and Camden, East Orange, Plainfield, And then, you know, bridge and tunnel. You know, everything was bridge and tunnel, man, from the, you know, Lincoln Tunnel to and mostly the George Washington Bridge was my connection to Harlem, which was my connection to jazz and the arts. So when I was young, I had two aunts. My father had a sister named Mary, and my mother had a sister named Mary, and both of them owned record shops. Back in the day when you would sell 45s and you would play the music of the hits, Motown and, you know, Watt Stacks and Gamble and Huff, and all the hits were on 45s, and you would put a speaker outside and you play the hit records, and people would stop and come in and buy the records. And so both my uncles, my Uncle Verl and my Uncle Rosie, used to play jazz albums in the back. And I used to, you know, work, and both of them, you know, doing handiwork, sweeping as a kid. That sound got into my blood. And I became a jazz aficionado. And at that time, I started collecting albums and reading the linear notes. And I would travel in my mind with Miles Davis and Charlie Parker and Dexter Gordon on the backs of the albums. And they would talk about in the linear notes, you know, Dexter Gordon in Paris, you know, and at a globe. And I would look on the globe and see where Paris was. And I had a Encyclopedia Britannica, and I would open up the encyclopedia and find out and read about Paris, Copenhagen, Prague, and all these Black men traveling all around the world playing this music, man. And that attracted me. It was like, it gave me the sense that one day I want to travel. And so it opened up my mind and got my mind out of this just neighborhood thing into like, oh my God, we're actually all over the world. So it was a tumultuous time as well. You know, I'm talking about early 60s and living through that age, you know, that decade, you know, civil rights. And my mom's was a revolutionary. She was an entrepreneur. My mom and dad owned a store together, like a neighborhood store, bodega. They had their own business. And my mom was very heavy into politics, man. She was a voter registration leader. And she used her clout to help get Black and Latino people into office, alderman, councilman, mayor, you know, board of this, executive of that. And she advocated for all these different people to create community power, you know. She was my hero, and she still is till today, man. Very powerful woman, man. She packed a 45, you know, she was something, man. So I learned a lot of education from my mom, you know, that I didn't get in school, you know, books, different books that she would tell me to read. And she gave me a more intense version of what was going on around me, you know, more real version about, you know, sociopolitics and stuff. So I was very aware as a young age about all that stuff going on as well. So that's kind of how the early years were, 60s and 70s, you know, and living through the, you know, there's a whole history that's involved that it probably is another story, LA, but, you know, all the stuff with Malcolm and Martin and the Kennedys and the Vietnam War and, you know, women's liberation. And it was an intense decade, you know, all of us trying to figure out who we were as Americans and Black Americans, and Afros and the dashiki and the formula of, you know, respectability and, you know, and the racism, you know, that's still going on between down South and North. And most Black people had lineage from the South, you know, from the Great Migration after World War II. You know, many Black people got out of the South, you know, with factories and Pittsburgh and you know, where Detroit, which Dominique writes about a lot, Dominique Morisseau. There's that history, man, that August Wilson started to write about, you know, that whole Southern-Northern migration and what transpired between that. And that's what attracted me to the theater as well, because there was these great writers that were writing about this stuff, that were writing roles for us. You know, you didn't get those kind of roles on television, you know, until Roots came along, you know. But prior to that, you know, it was sitcom and, you know, comedy type stuff, but not no deep, intense stuff that eventually was happening in the theater.
In the theater.
So that's where, you really wanted to be an actor, like you could really get these words, man, these
say it and do it. Yeah.
Us and our families and our society, and not just the Black exploitation films, but films, that were happening with, Gordon Parks and Melvin Van Peebles. And, there were filmmakers that were, The Learning Tree. And, there were filmmakers that were making some films, but, they weren't being seen and they weren't being distributed like the other films were, So even today, I still stay connected with Robert Hooks. He's online. And I would recommend anyone that's listening that's young to tap into some of his posts, because he posts a lot of African-American historical things in the theater. And post photographs, post, commentary on who the actors were and the time. And so I would say to anyone that's on Facebook, see if you can connect into his posts and you'll learn a lot. He gives good history lessons, man. Also, Richard Wesley also is online, and he posts different things. One of our great American writers, wrote so many wonderful plays, and he talks about a lot of history of different things that people he's known. And so, it's good as an African American or any actor for that matter. Let me just not limited, but these are great American writers that we need to know about, and maybe start to resurrect some of their plays and do revivals of some of their plays, because some of those plays are just like, they're so relevant today. And they should be doing some of these plays, along with contemporary plays. And, but when you talk about doing revivals, I mean, that's why it's unfortunate that we don't have our own theaters to do these revivals, and so that's another story that has economic slavery and, and how we've been, relegated to the back of the bus again by not ownership and being able to produce our own material. So we're still having that conversation.
Come on now. We absolutely are. Mr. Ron, that's so rich. Thank you for that depiction of the 60s as an intense and very busy time, and just everything that you shared. That's so, again, just very rich in my imagination. I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit more about, were you the only child? When did you know you were an artist? Did you grow up doing the arts? Like, were you like one of those theater kids? And I'm just curious about sort of, when did you tap into like, I am an actor or an artist, and I want to be in the theater? Was it before you got to New York, or, I mean, just growing up a little bit more?
No, it was my connection to New York. I mean, I grew up, like a sports kid. I was really heavily into, the YMCA, like the Boys Club, YMCA. Yeah. That was the way of my parents keeping me off the streets, They got me involved in the YMCA, and I met a pool of friends. And so we were in all kinds of stuff, man. Basketball, football, trampoline, swimming. I became a junior Olympic AAU springboard diver and swimmer when I was from between 8 and 11. I took to the pool and the diving board, and I was very good at gymnastics at the time. So I was one of the sort of like a little celebrity in regards to the pool, and got into the local newspaper, young African-American boy makes good, junior kind of thing. I think I was probably one of the first African-American kids that was involved in the AAU Junior Olympic springboard diving competition.
Wow.
And I remember my mother taking me to all these different suburban YMCAs and places, and it was all white kids, man. I was the only African-American kid that was diving. There were divers in my town, the Cox brothers and James Cooley, I remember, who were very good at it. They were older than me. And they were also in the city pool. There was a pool in Patterson called the Lou Costello swimming pool. Only our city pool. So every black man and kid in town was in that pool, It was like the local pool, man. And, I became sort of a diving sensation. All the kids used to stop and watch me dive, different stunts and stuff. And but I remember when I got into high school, I started to reject it. I started to feel alienated because these meets, they started to cost. You know, you had to drive different places, and you had to get a coach, and I saw it was kind of a strain on my parents. And then I started to rebel against it because I felt alienated from my friends, and you know, it was again in the time of revolution and militancy, and I started to pick up on that vibe of like, only white black kid here, and I started to build this little sort of resentment against it. And so, you know, I stopped doing it, you know, because I wanted to play basketball with my friend, and so I continued to do things at the Y, but I got into basketball and football and baseball and hanging out on the streets, you know. And that was something that I was missing because I was always have to practice or go to diving stuff. Yeah. And so hindsight is 2020. Not that I think about, man, I could have probably been a world-class diver, but man, I loved my friends so much, and I missed hanging out on the streets, man. And for all of us growing up in our neighborhoods, man, it's so alluring, you know, to be hanging out on the streets with your friends, and then you start smoking weed and drinking beer, and you know, and then you start thinking about girls, and, you know. So I got into that lifestyle, and so that kind of took me. Once I started driving and going to New York, it became that's when I wanted to, you know, study music and be an artist, you know. But early on, it was all about just the neighborhood and stuff. I started expanding as I got older, and going to New York, and then a whole nother world opened up for me.
Absolutely.
I completely did 180, you know, and it became all about art and music and hitting it and educating and reading books and you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. You touched on your time at Ramapo. Can you say a little bit more about sort of that experience for you at that time, and like what was the sort of thing that kind of helped you launch out of college into the world? Was there something like a seminal moment, you know, during your college years that you were like, oh, I realized that kind of shaped me, or something happened besides the moment from switching from music to theater?
Yeah, I think anyone has an opportunity to go to college. From what I remember, it was sort of like transformative. You know, it was that time where you could transform from being a boy into a man, you know, or you're trying to wrangle with it. And that's what college was for me. It was like growing up, you know, you're away from home. I stayed on campus, even though I wasn't far from Patterson, but it was enough distance to be on my own, you know, start to make my own decisions, like, you know, whether or not I wanted to go to class or not. You know, that's that first time you make your own responsible decisions on like, oh shit, I don't have to go.
I don't have to go nowhere if I don't want to.
Ain't nobody telling me to go. Ain't nobody telling me to get up, you know. And so that's the first time you I remember experienced that independence of like, I can do whatever the hell I want to do.
That's right.
And so am I going to do the right thing, or I'm going to do the wrong thing?
Exactly.
And more than not, that I look back, I did the right thing. And there were so many times I did the wrong thing. And then many times I was so glad I did the right thing, because now those decisions become life-threatening, you know? And so now you're talking about making decisions that are going to affect your life for the rest of your life, you know? So thank God I had a good foundation to where my consciousness was good enough to say, okay, but I also been blessed. I made bad decisions that almost cost me my life, you know, and there, but for the grace of God or some kind of miracle, I got through it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I remember college was for me. It was like, oh, so many hard decisions to make in regards to whether I'm going to do the right thing or the wrong thing, you know. So, and that was when I got more serious about the arts. And it also was the time when I knew that's all I wanted to do. Like I had made that decision during college that for the rest of my life, this is what I'm going to pursue. One way or another, I'm going to be some kind of artist, you know. Hopefully, you know, I'll make good on it. And I stayed inner true to it, even though my outer decisions almost cost me a lot, but that inner energy that always stayed on fire. And I attribute that a lot to my mother, somehow her voice remained always in my head, man, about what you're going to do, like, what are you going to do? And whether she was living or even when she's passed up until today, voice remains with me, that moral compass that puts me at the precipice of whether or not I'm going to do the right thing or have courage or deal with my fear. So, which is the most difficult thing for all of us, especially African Americans. We grow up in a place where we're fed to be fearful. It's the whole idea of relearning, right?
Totally.
Free your mind, relearn all the things that you learned are not right.
That's right.
These untruths that we have to come to grips with between ourselves and one another as well. So that was the beginning of that part of my life in college, where I was learning all these things, and then after college, it was like, okay, now I have to kind of implement all this stuff in a less safer environment.
Environment.
And independence, there's still sort of a safe environment, right?
Totally. Yep.
The rent's paid. You ain't got to pay rent.
That's right.
But then you leave that, and it's like, oh shit, like, how am I going to be an artist when I got to have a job? Unless you get into like, one of the elite programs, where you're filtered into Yale, NYU, Juilliard, Carnegie Mellon, Michigan State, whatever the case may be. But that wasn't my path. I didn't think about that path at the time. It wasn't until years later where I realized, oh shit, I probably could have gotten into a good grad program. But that didn't come to my consciousness, or nobody was talking to me about it.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I didn't realize about that until years later. I thought the path was you get out on the streets, you bang, and do this and that. So, but that's what the college thing was for me.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing.
78.
Oh, that's amazing. And then after Ramapo, did you go straight to New York and stay, or what was the, and again, you touched on this earlier, but I'm curious about if there was a moment after college, you're in New York, that you want to be an artist, you're pursuing it, that was a transformative moment for you. I mean, did you see a show? Did you have an audition? Did you speak to an artist, a fellow actor or someone? I mean, was there a moment right after that you can totally remember and look back on and say, wow, that moment totally shifted things?
Yeah, it was a culmination of different things. I mean, that was happening before I graduated. After I graduated, I was just beating the pavements, right? Going to New York. I was commuting from New Jersey. I moved back home, and I was trying to figure out a way how to be able to afford my own apartment in New York. It was like wrangling to get a job. What would I do to work, try to support myself? But I also became addicted to drugs during that time. And I had to make a decision. I did a geographic about 2 years after I graduated. But by the time I got out of college, starting around my sophomore year, I was getting high a lot with my friends. At the time, man, it was, to be honest with you, LA, it was a thing. You never were thinking, oh, I'm going to get addicted. It was like everybody and their mother was getting high, right? It was a part of this culture that was happening.
Culture, yeah.
Anybody that can tell you that grew up around that time, and some people dealt with it, it's like, yeah, I got high and then I stopped, and other people were like, I got high and I just kept getting high,
Exactly.
So what happened to me was I realized, oh shit, I got addicted. I got addicted. And the streets were full of drugs at the time, man. It wasn't until hindsight is 20 years later that I realized I got swept up into the war, with our psychology of how they dumped all these drugs into our neighborhoods, and and then a decade later it became crack, and but we were part of that whole COINTELPRO movement where they were funding drug wars overseas, and so they flooded our neighborhoods all these drugs. And I got swept up into that, first wanting to make money, to get an apartment. And like Biggie say, don't get high in your own supply, and so, and that's what happened to me, like I got swept up in with these cats who had a way for me to make some money so I could get a nice apartment in New York. And that's how that started, but I couldn't stop using the drug, So I decided to do a geographic. And that's when I left New York. I drove across country to Los Angeles, not to be an actor, but to do a geographic, to get away from people, places, and things, as they say. I managed to stay clean, and I ended up getting a job driving a bus, just to kind of alter things in my life, not thinking about acting, just kind of pull my shit together, And I stayed clean for almost 3 years. And then I gravitated back to a circle of friends that were gamblers. So I became a hustler and a gambler, going out on the racetrack at Santa Anita with these cats, man, and making a lot of money gambling as well as driving a bus. But I lost a job driving a bus because I got addicted again. So I came back to New York, and I went to what they call a TC, therapeutic community. I don't know if they still have them, but they're drug rehabs. And I went to a drug rehab and got clean, and came out and stayed clean ever since. And that was it was 1986. And so, and then I went back to the streets of New York and continued to do what I started doing before I left. And that was hitting the pavements, working jobs. And then 3 years later, my daughter was born. I got into a love affair, a passionate love affair with her mother, Kim Leslie. And we had our daughter, and that was for me another voice. And my mother, I remember she said to me, she was like, that's your blessing, because no one expected it. It wasn't a Planned Parenthood type situation. Just this passion that we had for one another. And, we let go of everything else. As she became pregnant, we decided, we want to have this child together. So that was the blessing. That's when everything opened up for me, as opposed to like, oh my God, my world is upside down. I thought, oh, this is it. I got someone else that I can focus on besides me. And selfish, egotistical lifestyle that was like the world was all about me. And then I realized with my daughter, things really shifted for me, man. It's like, I just felt like, and still today, I feel like, man, that was a major turning point. Everything started happening for me once my daughter was born. And it was just the opposite of what everyone's telling me, You can't be an actor, you got to get a job, you got to get insurance, you got to think about college. It's like, no, I think I can do this differently. Something's telling me in my heart that I can do this differently if I just take her with me. You know what I mean?
God.
Yeah, everybody was saying, well, what are you going to do? And I kept saying, I'll take her with me. Well, how are you going to do that? And I was like, I don't know, but I just know that I'll take her with me. What about babysitter? I was like, I'll take her with me. And the theater embraced that. That's one of the places you can go. If you have children, theater embraces it, man. And so artistic people are open to things like that. So I didn't have a 9 to 5 where I had to go to the office and leave my, it's like, well, rehearsal, I bring her with me. If I got a show, I bring her with me. In the dressing room, I just got to teach her the etiquette of it. And children, if you teach them, they follow along, man, because all they want to do is be with you.
That's right. Yes.
You know what I mean? Kids, they don't care where you are. You could be in down in the sewer, and they're like, yeah, I want to hang out in the sewer. It's like, they just want to be around.
They just want to be with you.
And I realized that. I was like, okay, we can make this work, But I got ahead of myself. That's what the college, the 2 years after college, the 4 years in LA, and then coming back to New York in 1986. Yeah.
Wow.
And then Ron Cephas Jones was born, Before that, I was Ron Jones or Ronald Jones, Ron C. Jones. But that's when the Cephas came in. And I was hanging out at a spot called the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. poetry slams were going on. It's another renaissance of art. It was like a renaissance, man. And I was in the right smack dab in the middle of it. You know, Rome Neal, Miguel Agarin, Willie Bedoya, Richard Gaines, Lemon Anderson, just a whole, but Dale Orlando Smith, Lois Griffith, just a slew of cats, man, that were down there. Artists, writers, directors, musicians. You go down there and you see a play, a poetry reading, and then music, and then dance until 4 a.m, man. It was a haven for artists, man, to express themselves. And so, you know, it wasn't about making money. It was about being on the scene and finding yourself and making a name for yourself. And I did a play down there. My man Rome asked me, I was reading poetry, jazz poetry. Another good friend, Samuel B. Harps, was a playwright. Rome was a director. I was a poetry reader, and he brought this play to Rome, and Rome said, well, why don't we have Ron do the lead role? And it was based loosely on the life of Lee Morgan, who's a great hard bop trumpet player who in 1972, his Commonwealth wife shot him dead in the club in Slugs. Very famous story. And so Sam wrote a play loosely based on that. And I played the lead role. And I'm telling you, LA, again, like, you know, numbers. We're talking about East Village. I wasn't even on the acting scene. We're talking about off Broadway.
Off, yeah.
Right? And one night, one of the biggest casting directors in New York happened to be in the audience. Her name is Meg Simon. And she was directing, casting all these big Broadway plays. August Wilson, all these big Broadway plays. I think she was also casting television stuff at that time as well. A year later, because she had cast a Cheryl West play called Before It Hits Home. Good friend of mine, Chief Randolph Smith, was in it. James McDaniels played the lead role in it. She told me, she said, I was looking for you to cast you in this play, but I couldn't find you. You weren't in the books, you weren't Equity, you know. So a year later, she was casting a play by Cheryl West again called Holiday Heart.
Yay!
Directed by Tazewell Thompson. And she finally got me on the phone. She said, I've been looking for you for a year. She was like, now I have this play by Cheryl West called Holiday Heart. There's this role. Would you come in and screen for me? Just come in my office and just read it so I can make sure that you're right for this role. So I was like, yeah. So I went in, I read it, just reading. And she said, come again tomorrow, prepare it, and then perform it for me in the audience again. So I went home and I in her office again. Her and Heidi Griffith was her assistant, who ended up being a major casting at the Public. So it was her and Heidi there. And so I prepared it. I came back and I auditioned just for them. And she said, okay, you're ready. She was like, what are you doing Thursday? Tazewell's in town auditioning for callbacks. He was like, I'm going to put you in the callback. And so I went in and I knocked it out. And he asked me to come back again. He made me do some adjustments. And I got cast in my first major theater role. And it was a tour. Syracuse Stage, Cleveland Playhouse, and Seattle Rep. And then it was going to come back to New York to the Manhattan Theater Club for a full run, limited run. And so I embarked on this journey, and I was separated from my daughter's mother. We were out of court. It was just like we decided, okay, we got to figure out a way how to do this, because she was a singer. She was singing at night, working with a band, and I'm trying to be an actor. We were separated. And so like, you know, we went to therapy. We were really trying to figure out how to be artists, but we were dedicated to being parents together. And my whole thing at that time was to convince her and let her know, and my daughter know, that I was not leaving, that I am here. You know, hook or crook, I'm here.
That's right.
all the problems that are going to come up, I'm going to confront them. So it wasn't like I'm not absent. You know, it was like that thing of teaching my daughter every time I would leave that I'm coming back.
That's right.
You know, tomorrow, you know, like not next week, not on the weekend. I was like, I'll be here tomorrow. I'm just going to sleep. And then in the morning, I'll come back. And that was my thing. I would go to Jersey. I would come back to Brooklyn at 6 a.m. to take my daughter to get ready to prepare her for school. You know, and I would pick her up and I would do homework with her and I would teach her how to ride a bike. And then with the theater stuff, like I said, I would just take her with me with a bag, with diapers and bottles and just drag her with me, you know. So it was like going the extra mile. And so my, I brought her out to Cleveland. I brought her up to Syracuse, you know, for some time. So I got back to MTC. They recast the play. And only Keith Randolph Smith and I were the original members. And Meg helped me get my equity card. And she helped me get a major agent. J. Michael Bloom, they ended up folding after a while. They went bankrupt or something, but it was a big agency, man. And so that's when I started to book a little television and get seen, you know, Law and Order and NYPD Blue and all the New York stuff, man. But that was the other transition that transpired after that, after post 86 and post Jasmine, you know, and the birth of my daughter. And then that's another part of the story that goes on that, you know, where she's became an actor herself, a very good one, and a very successful one at that, you know, beyond everything that I had accomplished at that age, you know, so, and that was the plan. A lot of people don't know that, but that was the plan.
Talk about it.
And so, you know, I tell people that, you know, like, that's not a coincidence, you know, that just like, you know, King Richard planned for his two daughters to become tennis players, or just like, you know, the Curry brothers' father planned for them to become basketball players. It was like, that was the plan. Once my daughter told me she wanted to be an actor, I was like, okay, then we're going to make this work. And I'm going to find you and support you and teach you everything that I know, because I realized she had a passion for it. So, and I had confidence in her. I knew she was going to be good at this, man. And I brought her up through the intensives at the lab, and I put her around people that were going to help her be success, you know, like Portia and Liza and Marlene and Liz and all these wonderful, powerful, incredible women that were a part of the Labyrinth Theater Company. So I made her a part of the Labyrinth Theater Company. And she became a mainstay there, doing readings and learning how to read and watching all these other beautiful women support her and treat her like their own, you know. And that was a part of the plan as well, you know, putting her around all these powerful men as well, man, who would teach her how, she would feel what it was to be treated like a queen, you know, like a beautiful, powerful woman, man, and not, you know, looked down upon, you know, for her sexuality or for her, you know, or that kind of thing. And so, and that's a large part of what's important about raising either a boy or a girl, man, putting them around positive role models that she can learn from, not only from me and her mother, but from the people around us.
People around.
Yeah, you know, all the singers that my daughter's mother put her around, all the influences that she picked up on vocally, and then all the influence that she picked up on as far as the stage is concerned. All that is in her, you know, which makes her a very good person as well. You know, she's great energy, my daughter. So,
Ooh, Mr. Ron, thank you for sharing all of that beautiful, beautiful journey and history and story. And it's just so powerful. Everything that you're saying. I love the story about New Eurekan Poets Cafe and how that turned into a thing. I love the story about taking your baby with you and always coming back.
Yeah.
Oh, that sends me. And I love what you're talking about in terms of surrounding her by artists and good people and the intentionality behind the work that you were doing there. Once she claimed a passion, you noticed it. So I just want to celebrate all of those things, Mr. Ron, and including the years you went away and drove the bus, and all of that back and forth. We have to celebrate it. I believe that all of those moments matter and get us to where we are today. I'm curious to hear you talk 2 seconds, if you will indulge me, about the Cephas and Ron Cephas Jones. You mentioned that's when Cephas was born. What does that mean? What does Cephas mean? And what is the difference between Cephas and C or Ron Jones?
Cephas was the moment I embraced my dad. That's dedicated to my father. And not many years and not many times I thought about my father, because we didn't have a great relationship. But hindsight in 2020, I realized we did. You see, my interpretation of it when I was young was that he didn't like me, or, never really talked to me, never really embraced me, never really hugged me. Not understanding, that, my father went through some shit, man. I mean, he wasn't a 6th grade education, came out the South. So I can only imagine the shit that he had to deal with. I didn't know that when I was young,
Right.
Your father's hard, he was hard, but my father was there. I was one of the few cats, man, that grew up with a 2-parent household. That wasn't always the norm. At least that wasn't the norm that was projected. There were a lot of Black men that were there for their family.
Right.
But
That's right.
that wasn't never projected.
That wasn't projected.
The projection was always that we were gone, we were drunk, we were abusive. But that's not the truth. The truth was there were a lot of my friends who had 2-family households who were businessmen. One of my friends' father run a bowling alley. Another friend had a gas station. A friend of mine ran a drugstore. There were Black businesses all over Patterson at that time, Newark and Jersey City. So I didn't acknowledge that when I was young. And it wasn't until I got older and I started reading Dr. Ben and Francis Cress Welsing and Hakeem Abudi and Amiri Baraka, I started to understand the psyche of the Black man. And the different things that they had to deal with, And so once I started to learn and relearn, I really embraced my father, man. And I remember there was these quiet moments. Sometimes quietness is how these men express themselves. They don't talk a lot. They do. It's like, I don't have the words, but let's just go fishing.
Yes.
Next to each other, and let me show you how to pull a fish in, and and go to the wholesalers together and buy the product that we're going to sell that makes you put some money in your pocket. Like simple, basic shit like that, man, that I didn't appreciate when I was young. So Cephas is dedicated to my father. It was my father's name. His name is Johnny Cephas Jones. And Cephas means, it's Aramaic. It means Peter, which means rock. And in the Southern terms, but it's also in the celestial stars. It's a celestial name, and it's Greek as well, the Latin Greek, I believe. And so I got educated. I was like, oh my God. And I learned this from a bishop at St. Peter's Church Jazz Vespers on Lexington Avenue. That church is famous for giving jazz vespers. The bishop was a jazz aficionado. And some of the most famous jazz artists would have their ceremonies, their burials and ceremonies at this church. And I went to a jazz vespers with Rome Neal and read some poetry with a jazz band. And the bishop came up to me and said, Ron Cephas Jones. He was like, do you know the origin of the word Cephas? And I was like, not really. I think it's Southern. And then he began to educate me on it. And that's when I decided to take it as a professional name. And it's a real weird story. But one day, my daughter was studying at the neighborhood playhouse. She did a 2-year program there after doing 3 years at Berkeley. And I would go and pick her up from there, and we'd go and have coffee and talk about her classes and the things she was doing. And one day she looked at me, she said, Dad, I would like to take the name of Cephas for my acting name. Is it okay if I say that my name is Jasmine Cephas Jones? And I just started crying, man. I mean, it was one of those defining moments again where, she took on that name and it became, now it's for me, it's legacy, right? It's legacy, right? So when I go, as things should be, that name lives on. And so that's when I got that feeling of like, this is what legacy is about, man. It's about paying forward, passing it down, and keeping it going, man. And so and that's what's happening,
Mr. Ron, when you say, sometimes they don't have the words, sometimes they just do. It's in the doing.
Yeah, it's
that
in the
right
doing.
There. Oh,
especially
man.
for those kind of cats, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They come up hard, they live a hard life,
Yeah.
And it takes a while for a man to understand that. We don't have that transition like,
That's right.
Bar mitzvahs or whatever, where you.
That's right.
But you have to be open.
You have to be open.
There were so many men like that in my life. Had uncles and even cats on the street, man, would always preach to me about staying off the street. Everybody on the street wasn't like, come be in the streets. A lot of cats be like, you don't need, what you doing here, Ronnie? You know what I mean? What are you doing? I mean, cats would like look out for you, because they saw potential, and so, there were a lot of men like that, and like Montrellis, those kind of men are very familiar to me. They become very, very real. Montrellis is very real for me, man. I mean, a lot of guys come out of Vietnam, come out of addiction, come out of being thieves to become elevated like angels.
Yeah.
Protectors, man. They like phoenixes rising, man. And they're all around us, Some of us latch on to that. And that's what saved us. Those men save us. And women. They're saviors. And you can ask anybody from rappers to, they'll say there's certain cats that help save them, put them on the right path. You hear that story a lot. So that was that part of it. Yeah.
You so brilliantly already just touched on what I was going to ask you next, which is, God. Well, first of all, I want to say that I celebrate the fact that you are and were able to shift your thinking around your relationship with your dad then, and you still hold that now, and able to step into that and claim it and have that level of compassion and understanding that you didn't always have. And I was going to ask you, where do you think that shift comes from? Is it you having some life experiences yourself and realizing, oh shit, we're all people? Or where did that sort of come from? And again, you've kind of already touched on it, but yeah, do you have anything about that? I'm just curious about. Then you talk about Montrellis, and then you talk about just cats like Montrellis and how we all, I think, as people, especially those of us who allow ourselves to live in the sort of depths of whatever we're going through, like really be in it, how we rise out of it, like you're talking about. And I guess I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit more about where you think that sort of elevation is born. Is it when those of us who go through shit and then we're able to sort of transform it, or people who allow ourselves to? I'm just curious.
Therapeutic education, like education, right? It's like knowledge. Like when you don't know something, you don't know.
That's right.
But when you know, so it came from like reading books, talking to other people that are more elevated, that are reaching to try to relearn and get out of this psyche of who we think we are.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. That was the understanding. Like a perfect example is the incident that just happened at the Oscars. Like what happened is so much deeper, and some of the people that are talking about that are elevated are talking about the deeper ramifications of what actually happened. And what actually happened were two Black men who are attacking one another in a Eurocentric realm that's been going on for 400 years. How do we get to that point where another Black man wants to attack another Black man because that Black man said some awful words to him about his wife? So somehow in that moment, both these men are elevated.
Yes.
Happened in a split of a second that they couldn't hold on to this elevation and revered back to what they've always been trying to do is divide and conquer. And that's what we have to talk about. It's not so much what Will did or what Chris did. It's what happened.
It's what happened.
Right. What happened that got Will to be at that point where he felt comfortable enough to do that? And also, how do we get to the point where Chris gets comfortable enough to tell a joke about someone's wife? Okay, if we can play it off, oh, he's a comedian, and oh, Will snapped. That's right. But what's the deeper story? And that's the deeper story. It's like so many times a cat will pull out a gun and just kill another black man without any disregard for his life. Like, how do we get to that? It's the same thing. He might as well shot. He could have shot him.
Yes.
Depending on the circumstances and where they were at. You could play out the same scenario in a living room with a Crip and a Blood, or with two friends who've been knowing each other who are gangsters, and then one guy just said, man, when you get fucked, bang!
And it's over. One split second, one breath. Yeah.
One breath, and that's what happened, and that's what the sadness of it is that there's such deeper issues behind that. And that, going back to your initial question, is what happened for me. It was like the elevation of my mind to elevate and start to understand all the years of conditioning that I had to reprogram myself to look at my father in a different lens.
Yes.
I had to look at him in an Afrocentric lens and not a Eurocentric lens.
Okay, get off my phone, Mr. Ron.
No, so now I understand who my father really is and really was and what he went through, and not be so selfish to think that he owes me that much. When the man was there every fucking day, busting his ass to put me through college, to feed me, to buy me a car, to put money in my pocket, why would I, so I had to understand that and learn that. And then it was the sad, not the sad part, but the unfortunate part, it was after my father passed away that I learned that. And there were many times in my life afterwards where I would go, God, Dad, I just wish you were here so I can just take you out for a steak dinner and tell you how much I appreciate what you did for me, So I do it in prayer.
Yes.
But I miss the physicality of it, to be able to just fucking hug him,
Yeah.
And say, I know it was hard for you, man, and I'm sorry. I wish I could have did more, but I didn't know either.
Yay.
I didn't know until now, And so you know what you know when you know it. But once you know it, you got to own it, You can't let it go. And you got to take it to the next step, and then you got to pass it forward. So, yeah, man. Yeah.
That is brilliant. Oh, that resonates so deeply with me. Everything you just said about the depth that is of what is happening between these two elevated brothers.
Yeah.
And the Eurocentricity of it all, and us needing to tap into the Afro. And I mean, there's so much, as you just so beautifully stated, and I'm just so grateful for that.
And none of us are privy to, none of us are void of it. All of us have to go through some kind of enlightenment in order to get a better understanding of who we are and how we relate to one another.
That's right.
And we can't keep going back to that commonality of, not really caring about our actions.
That's right.
And really trying to have a control and understanding. And you're talking about a man who is one of the most loving, revered actors in the play.
Gorgeous human beings on the planet.
How could you not love him?
That's right. That's right.
Especially to have an action like that, there's something so much deeper.
There's so.
And we have to address that and look at it, not just make it fodder for the reporters in the media.
That's right.
We as a people have to take an example from that and say, what happened? And, we have to stop dealing with each other like that.
That's right.
We have to continue to find a way to relearn.
That's right. That's right.
That's what it was for me. I don't have any malice against either one of those cats.
That's right.
Man.
That's right. Same.
What I understood was something happened that is so familiar, that's been happening for so long, and it just happened at the wrong time. In a space that the world could see, and maybe there's something positive will come out of that, for us.
That's right.
We just got put on display because both these cats are our sons and our fathers.
Yes, they are.
If anything else, they're not just an actor and a comedian. Those two men are fathers and sons.
That's right.
And if you can look at it from that perspective and not just Chris Rock, the comedian, or Will Smith, the actor, but two Black men, they're our brothers, they're our fathers, and they're our sons.
That's right.
So we have to find a way to look at it from that perspective.
From that perspective. Oh,
and
man.
not get caught up in petty, like, oh, man, shit, they attacked me. And yeah, but that's obvious. But
that's
what's
obvious.
not? Yeah.
Come on now. What's not obvious?
What's not obvious?
Ooh, that's
like
so good.
An elephant in the room, but no one is talking about, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, we're almost there I think we are there now. I just want to just carve out a moment in this conversation once again to celebrate your performance as Montrellis. Because again, that was the thing that I saw that made me say, I've got to invite Mr. Ron onto this platform and say thank you for that incredible performance. And we've already talked about cats like Montrellis. So there's not really a question in here. It's just a simple thank you once again, Mr. Ron. I thought your embodiment of that character was so grounded and so real and raw and felt very much, I think, the way Lynn probably intended, but also with all of Mr. Ron and all of the life and experiences that you brought to it. And so really, again, it's a thank you. I thought that performance was incredibly moving. That whole experience that night in the theater was like, whoa. Again, like I said earlier, I felt like I had an opportunity to kind of see where I am on my journey and how I've elevated. And it was incredible. It was incredible. And I wish I had more words. And I hadn't seen you on stage since The Tempest at Marcus Garvey Park at Classical Theater of Harlem, directed by Carl Cofield. And you were stunning in that production. You're stunning in everything you do. And at the same time, you and CLYDE'S as Montrellis felt very real to me and very right and all the things. And I just have to say thank you for your work in that show.
Well, I'll culminate by saying this, LA. That piece became probably the most important theater experience of my life, because 2 years before that, I didn't really know if I was going to be able to do theater again. I had came up with I had a lung disease called COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. And I was relegated to an oxygen machine in a wheelchair. And I had a decision to make whether or not to spend the rest of my life not doing what I love to do, which for me felt like death, or embark on possibly getting a double lung transplant, which I decided to do. And it took a year to get my body together just for the operation. And one of the dreams and the nightmares I had in the hospital, and one of the bargains I made with God was, if you let me live through this, to do another play. Because I thought, well, I might be able to do a little bit of television because, it's on and off, but to be able to breathe, which lung disorder is all about breath, right? So to be able to breathe through a play, because you can't do a play without breath.
That's right. And
so I used to have these nightmares in the hospital about not having this voice. And I talked about in this article, and I would be on a stage and it would just be black, and I would be screaming these lines, but no one could hear me. No one was seeing me. And it was the drive that I had. And when I got out and I got through it, Lynn called and said she had this role.
Hey, God.
So it was like, wow. I mean, and this is a true story, man. Like, how do I get back on the stage? And not only did I go back on the stage, I went back on the stage on Broadway.
That's right.
With a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winning writer.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the most revelatory roles in my career.
Yeah.
So he brought me abundance.
Yes.
It was abundance, man, that came at the end of such a place of darkness.
Yes.
And so it was very biblical, man. I mean, and I'm not saying it in a biblical way, but it sounds biblical because it's true. There was a darkness and a depth of darkness that was so heavy that you feel like you're never going to get out of it. And once you rise up, the light was so bright. it was overwhelmingly bright. We're talking about Broadway and one of the best writers in the business, not just reading or and that's what Montrellis was for me. That's why it was so beautiful to play that role and do that role, because it was indicative of who he was. So it was such a personal role for me, because Montrellis had the same experience.
He had the same experience.
Same exact experience. Just different circumstances.
Just different circumstances. Mr. Ron, oh my God, thank you for sharing that, because now it makes so much more sense to me why it vibrated on that level, why it resonated on that level, right? It's not just about, I saw an actor who I thought did a great job. Again, you and I both know we're in New York.
That's right.
I mean, you can see an outstanding performance at the train
all
station,
the time. That's right.
On a train, right? But it's really, and what I'm really trying to articulate in these conversations that I'm having with folks this season is that it's a spiritual connection. Yeah. It's a vibration. It's divinity. It's divine. What I'm talking about when I say your performance moved me, just like back when I saw the show in college, that made me want to be in the theater. It's something deeper. And listening to you today talk about everything, but also about your recent experience, that's what I felt. And it resonated for me and with me in the way that it did, because these past 2 years for me and for all of us, for a lot of folks, have been that sort of deep darkness, kind of am I gonna make it the whole nine, right? Yeah. And having to really, and for me personally, I have allowed myself to sit in that darkness, really be in that darkness and all of what that means. And I am now, I feel, and have been sort of coming into the light. And so that, again, that performance met me right where I am on my journey. And so that's what this thank you is about. It ain't about you did a good job acting. You always do a good job acting. We all know that. We know that part, but it's about the life behind the story behind you in that performance, and I love what you talk about, and I'm gonna leave this alone after I say this. I love that you acknowledge that when you had this moment and you said, dear God, let me make it through. And when I make it through, I just want to do one and be able to get through this one more play. And you acknowledge that he didn't just give you a reading, No. He didn't just even give you Broadway and Lynn Nottage, if that's not enough, but he gave you a character like Montrellis that is talking about everything.
I don't know what to say about that. It's only the truth, LA. It's like the truth. The truth is, it was the truth. And it blows my mind just as much as it blows your mind, man.
Mind-blowing, mind-blowing.
I mean, like I said before, man, when you have that inner light and that's something that you just know, and that's what I prayed for. I just prayed, just let me be able to see that I can do a play again, that I can breathe through dialogue, because that's who I am, right?
Yes, right.
Without that, I just felt like, life would feel like death, like living death, right? When you can't do what you really love to do. I guess somehow I would have transitioned and found a way to be okay with and find that light, but I asked that and it was given to me. And I use that word blessed a lot, just blessed, man.
Yes, yeah.
And now every day it really is about breathing, right?
Yes, right. Yes.
Granted, most. We never think about breathing.
Never think about it.
We never meditate, or we jog, or
that's right. That's
right. But for the most part, you don't think about breathing because it's such a natural act, right?
It's a natural act.
Every morning I wake up, it's like,
ooh.
And just that breath is a blessing.
Yeah, God.
Because it was taken away from me from self-destruction. And so it wasn't like God took it away from me. I did that on myself. And so he helped me correct that, or she helped me correct that.
Yeah, God. Yes, yes.
Yeah, because God in all his forms.
That's right. Yes.
So, and that was kind of miraculous. It's sort of a miracle, if you believe in miracles in that way.
If you believe in miracles. Well, I do, brother. And you used a word earlier that I think sums up my experience of watching you play that character and watching that show. And the word is holy. Yeah, very, very holy. It was a holy experience. And now I know exactly why. And I know I ain't crazy because I know what I felt.
I'm glad you picked up on that, because So a lot of people felt that. It was like, I saw you before. It was just something about it, Ron. It was something about it.
Yeah.
You know, that was so pure and elegant and
That's
and
right.
not acting, you know, because it was.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Thank you. That's exactly it. And I have to tell you that I hadn't read any articles about your story. So I didn't know that until right now. And I purposely go back and read the article. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it came out a couple of weeks before the run ended, and right in the middle of the run. And so then a little more people, it was the first time I publicly talked about it, because I had been going through it all through the This Is Us experience, you know, and a part of that was a part of who that character was as well. You know?
That's right. That's right.
That was a whole nother journey that was going on.
That's right. That's right.
You know, I had a best friend also that was going through stage 4 cancer as well. So all of that journey was all culminated, involved in a very personal thing. When these roles come up, man, I have a lot of depth of personal experience to put into these particular things. Yeah. You know, so that was, like you said, that's Montrellis was me.
And woo, thank you for that, Mr. Ron. Listen, I can talk to you all day. I like to wrap these conversations. I can talk because you teaching and preaching. I like to wrap these conversations up with 3 questions. The first one being, what does it mean to you to be celebrated?
I think it means the acknowledgement that the work that I put in is being seen. You know, it's like when you plant a flower, you want people to experience it, right? Not just for yourself, but you want it to bloom, and then you want people to come and take a smell of it. You don't want it to be picked. You just want people to see it. You know, like when you walk past a garden, you know, and you celebrate that moment, it's like, look how beautiful this garden is. You know? I live in Venice, and they have these walking paths. They're used to see these beautiful little homes and gardens. And so each time you walk past one you like, that's a moment of celebration. So I think that's what comes to mind. Yeah.
I love that. What or who do you celebrate?
I celebrate my family and my daughter, mostly, you know, but I celebrate my friends. I celebrate good food, and I celebrate breath.
Yeah, God. Listen, that is a word. That is a word. That is a word. I celebrate breath. And finally, what do you do to celebrate you?
I treat myself good. I mean, simple things like one particular example, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, I brought myself a brand new bicycle to celebrate. And it's simple. LA, this bicycle makes me so happy. And it's a nice one. You know, it's a Cadillac bicycle. So it's an older man bicycle. It's a cruiser. Okay. So it's not like speed. It's just like cruise. It's cruise. And I want to pedal. I hit a little button and it has a battery that operates on its own. Yeah. So I can just cruise. And that's how I celebrate me. Yes. I celebrate me by having a cup of tea on my back porch with the sun shining on my face. Pretty much every morning where I do my breathing exercises. And that's where I celebrate me.
Ooh, and by celebrating breath, you are celebrating you because we are breath and all the things.
Yeah, that's good.
Listen, Mr. Ron, I celebrate you. I love you, brother. I'm so grateful for you. I'm glad to be living in the time with you. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I'm so grateful for your characters and your work on stage and off stage and on screen. I'm just so glad that we exist at the same time and that we're on this journey together. And I just hope, I think that I speak for a lot of people when I say we love you, brother.
Thank you, man.
And we celebrate your progress and your journey, your spiritual journey, your life journey, your health journey, you know. And I'm just so glad that I get to say this to you. And I love you, brother. And I thank you. And I love you.
Thank you, LA. I love you too, brother. Very much.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for doing this, Mr. Ron. We're going to do this again soon. We got to keep talking.
You're on to something. You're on to something here. I love the celebrate thing, man. So keep it going, LA.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Ron.
I'm here for you, man. Just let me know.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, Mr. Ron. Take good care, brother. Okay.
God bless, baby.
All right. Bye-bye.
Peace.